The upcoming race weekend in Miami will see a lot of teams bring upgrades to their cars despite it being a sprint weekend, which was one of the primary factors to push the upgrades for another circuit where they'll be able to extract more from the car's new parts. However, with the grid being so close and compacted behind Verstappen, there is no time to waste. So Mercedes, McLaren and Ferrari are going to push towards greater gains with the new upgrades to try and establish a greater understanding of their cars and prepare for the ultimate test that will come in Imola. But with this in mind, what will these teams bring to the table? And more importantly, can they fix some of the painful underlying issues on their car, as is the case with the W15? It's safe to say that Mercedes' start to the season was one of the worst, if not the worst, since the team's entrance into the sport in 2010. Only in 2012, the team struggled to score more points in the first 5 races. However, the Silver Arrows are looking forward to turning their fortunes around in Miami, where one of the primary issues that they will be targeting with their upgrades will be the stability of the car, as well as the correlation issues between the data simulator and the on-track performance. Given the fact that the car acts like day and night in different parts of the track during the same day and same event, as Wolff said, it's not going to be an easy task because the team fundamentally doesn't know where they need to begin the hard work. But as Allison said, the upgrade package in Miami, which will probably revolve around the floor of the car, as F1 experts believe that the underneath of the W15 will see a new version in Miami, is poised to bring the car into a much more sweet window to operate. And that despite the poor results that they're showing on the track, they do not need a lot to improve on to be fighting for podiums and potentially even race wins, as bizarre as that sounds. Talking about it in a greater extent, Allison said, "The challenge that we face in the coming races is to try and move the setup of the car and also the pieces that we bring to the car so that the balance is improved. We've got upgrade packages coming to the car, but also components that we hope will rectify the underlying balance that is causing us difficulty." The team seems to be contradictory when it comes to whether or not setup changes are affecting the car to a greater extent, as was the case in China, because although Hamilton admitted to having worked on his car's setup after the sprint race, which brought to the miserable Q1 exit and P18 start in the race, Russell said that it has nothing to do with it because both of them drove the car on a similar pattern of setup choices. Regardless, the upgrade package in Miami will reveal whether the team has what it takes to overcome the primary issue, and that is to understand whether the upgrades that they have planned and tested in the proper facilities are now going to work on the track. And this is something that Wolff has elaborated on further when talking about the Miami GP. He said, "Every weekend you go to, you learn things. We face the enjoyment of another sprint weekend with this second go of having 2 bites of the cherry. And we definitely learned during this weekend that if you're going to be ambitious in the sprint race and then tune it down for the main race rather than the opposite way round. Hopefully we'll land the car in a better place, that the upgrades that we're going to bring to Miami serve us well in a grid that in qualifying is very close. Around at the part of the battle we're fighting a few hundredths that can make a difference, and a couple of tenths would make all the difference in the world." But apart from Mercedes, it seems like there are teams out there who understand the platform that they are working on, and the upgrades that they will be bringing will be purely focused on optimizing further performance, which is the case of Ferrari and McLaren. The Maranello team has managed to speed up the process of catching up to Red Bull in their long-awaited Imola package. However, Miami will only see a part of this 2.0 version of the car that we are eager to see if it has the potential to swipe away the advantage of Red Bull, as Sainz said, and that part will be the floor. The updated version of the floor will enable Ferrari to understand whether or not they're moving in the right direction with the Imola upgrades, and maybe learn a thing or two about the setup in order to extract the maximum performance out of the car once it gets the first out of the 3 massive upgrade packages in 2024. That is, of course, if Red Bull's upgrades that they have also planned in Imola and will revolve around changing the concept of the car, something they've started in Suzuka and will finish in Imola, won't be as effective as they have planned for them in the first place. Be that as it may, though, we have been promised an interesting championship from Imola onwards. But until then, we shall see whether the floor that Ferrari planned is a step in the right direction, considering the fact that this is a circuit that has been vastly dominated by Red Bull in the first two editions. And what would be very interesting to see in Ferrari is the drivers' chemistry. We've noticed that sparks started to fly between Sainz and Leclerc, and the Spaniard admitted that the intra-team fight at the beginning of the Chinese GP cost them dearly places, that they would have been replaced in the race. But there was one thing that bothered Ferrari that they hoped wouldn't be as painful as it was: the car's setup. This is something that disabled the team from putting a lot of energy and temperature in their tyres, to the point of them being way too cold and unable to operate in the optimal window. So apart from the floor upgrades in Miami, the Maranello team would be smart to look at the setup choices as well, given the fact that they still have a lot of improvements to make in the qualifying area and the one-lap performance of the SF24. But a direct threat to their second seat could be McLaren, considering the amount of confidence that the Woking-based squad has in terms of fighting for podium finishes and race wins more frequently. This is something that has been talked about by Andrea Stella and Zach Brown, both of whom are entering the current race weekend with cautionary optimism that what they are bringing here, even though not nearly as large as what they brought last year in Austria and Singapore, could be more than a decent step in the right direction. Talking about the upgrades, Stella added, "The upgrades we have planned for Miami will not be as big as the two that we delivered last year in Austria and Singapore, but it should be a decent step, like it should be noticeable. I cannot say much more than that because otherwise we are talking about numbers. I would like to keep it confidential, but let's say not as big as Austria or Singapore." But similar to Mercedes, McLaren is also worried that what they have seen in the simulator, which promised them close fights up at the front, may not correlate to what they are going to experience on the track. And when talking about this matter to a further extent, the CEO of the team, Zach Brown, went on to simmer down the hopes of the fans in terms of expectations, adding, "We are looking forward to Miami, but there is always a little element of being nervous because the data tells you one thing and you hope it correlates with the racetrack. The great news is that our last handful of upgrades have done exactly what we thought they would, so there is no reason to believe that these upgrades won't have the same impact." With Norris' optimism that McLaren can fight for race wins with Red Bull under the right circumstances, which was more or less a direct threat to Verstappen and potentially Ferrari, we can never sign off the team that managed to gain over 1 second of performance in the middle of the season last year, and therefore turn from one of the worst to the 4th best team on the grid. But with McLaren being McLaren, there is no doubt that they won't be satisfied with P3, and they will be giving their maximum with the youngest duo of drivers to finish P2 in the Constructors' Championship, which is not that far-fetched of a scenario if the upgrades in Miami do their thing. With all this in mind, which team do you think will benefit the most from the upcoming race weekend in Miami? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and once you've done that, check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.